Well, if you're a straight white male in the state of Florida and you're wondering why your power is still not on, your skin color may be the answer. Kamala Harris has come out and stated that relief for Hurricane Ian, or from Hurricane Ian, provided by the federal government, should be based on trying to achieve equity, meaning that communities of color would be the first to be helped, because you see, the white folks had it pretty good before the hurricane. And so if you've got a nice house and things are going pretty well for you, you should be put to the back of the line as far as getting the power back on and maybe, handing out tarps to cover up your roof so that you don't get roof leaks, because that's a big issue, is that when you have a hurricane and it rips your roof tiles off, or maybe your whole roof, as I was just at somebody whose house had their entire roof pulled off. It was a metal roof and just flew away, wrapped around a tree. You need tarps. It's just a very basic thing, but they're hard to come by after a hurricane because they sell out everywhere, because there's a lot more people all of a sudden at once who need to put a tarp on their roof until they can get the roof repaired. Food. Let's say you're stuck in your house because it's flooded and you live down in like Port Charlotte or Northport, where all the houses are flooded, or even if your house itself is not flooded, the streets around you are flooded and you can't leave. They're going to need to make sure that the federal government, that FEMA is going door to door and handing out food to the residents of color first. And so if they have to skip, 4 white houses that are on the same block, just to make sure that the black people, or the what do they call them, BIPOC, that's the new umbrella term for the non-whites, to make sure that they get served first so that we can, try and further the goal of equity, then that's just how it's going to have to be. Whiteys are going to have to wait their turn. Thankfully, here in Florida, we're not entirely dependent on the federal government for our aid. The state is going to do a lot, and then, of course, plenty of private groups, plenty of people who want to donate things. And generally speaking, those who have the means to help during a crisis are going to help out their neighbors. That's been my experience so far. And it's a good thing, because Kamala Harris has made it clear that as long as this administration is in power, you do not want to be the white man in the FEMA camp. Now, with that out of the way, I don't want to make this, a hurricane disaster relief channel. There's plenty of people talking about the hurricane. I deal enough with it during the day. I don't want to talk about it on here. I couldn't even make a video yesterday because I didn't have time. It's just a mess everywhere here. So let's talk about Russia and Ukraine. Putin yesterday, I'm very sad I didn't get a chance to talk about it yesterday when it was, more relevant, but it's still relevant today. It's going to be relevant, for the foreseeable future, because Russia has officially annexed, they've made it clear, the Donbass, as well as Zaporozhye and Kherson, I believe that's how you pronounce it, are a part of Russia. So they got 4 new oblasts in the Russian Federation, and all the people there are now Russian citizens. And so there is no going back for Russia, if anyone in the West thought that was possible. I didn't think it was possible. I thought once the Ruskies sent their troops into eastern Ukraine, they were going to bite off a chunk. It was just a matter of how big. And frankly, they've bitten off a decent-sized chunk, and that could grow. Initially, it was thought, hey, they're just going to help Donbass separate once and for all from Western Ukraine, because it was clear that the Minsk Accords were not being enforced, and that the rights of the people in Donetsk and Luhansk were not being respected. But clearly Russia's mission has moved far beyond that. They have annexed 2 more oblasts, which form what the Wizards of Smart in the West call a land bridge, also known as a road, to Crimea. So they no longer, they'll still use, but they don't have to rely exclusively on that bridge that they built from, I forget which oblast in Russia, to Crimea. It's a very, very long bridge. People who are not fond of bridges would not like to cross it. Now people in Crimea can travel through the mainland by going up, because Crimea is no longer an island within Russia. It is now a peninsula once again. And it really was important that for the Ruskies to capture the land north of Crimea, because if you remember, not too long ago, I think it was like right around the time of the start of the war, the Ukrainians shut off the water to Crimea, or it might have even been sooner, to be honest. So they had to, by closing off the river and not letting the water flow down to Crimea, and so they were cut off from their water supply. Which, hey, if the West cares so much about the poor people of Crimea living under Russian occupation, you would think that they wouldn't try and cut off their water supply. So, for humanitarian reasons, the Russians really had to take control of this part of Ukraine. And Putin colored his speech about this with trying to make it more of a clash of civilizations type of tale, which, I don't have a problem with necessarily. I think that he certainly makes a good case against modern Western culture, and I think that it is smart of him to try and distance himself as much as possible from that and say, hey, everything they represent, child sex change surgeries, I'm the opposite of that, and that's what Russia stands for. That's not a bad way to try and get people on your side around the world, because pretty much everywhere outside of big cities in Western countries, people think that what the West does in terms of its sexual promiscuity, its celebration of fetishisms, and the increased sexualization of children, pretty much everyone on Earth outside of Western cities agrees that that is barbaric. And in the words of Putin, I think he said, like it was an act of Satanism or an act of worshiping Satan, something like that. It's Russian, so the translation can be a little iffy. But certainly, the Christian world outside of the West would almost universally agree with that. And the non-Christian world, I think, as well. I think most of Asia, you look at, you ask the average person in India, hey, what do you think of child sex surgery? They'll say they probably haven't even fathomed such a thing, and they would probably think that you're a very, very bad person for even coming up with such an idea. And so I think that despite what the Western media might say, the Ruskies probably have a lot more sympathizers around the world than the West does at this point. And this is a war between Russia and the West. The Ruskies have made that clear, that they are at war with the West, and I think the West made it clear a long time ago that they're at war with Russia. And so the war is not slowing down, I don't think, because of this annexation. I don't think that the Russians are going to rest on their laurels. First of all, they don't even control 100% of these territories at the moment, so they're going to have to ramp up their campaigns to solidify their new border. But I think that they are going to escalate, and once they've solidified their border, they're going to march deeper into Ukraine, what is left of Ukraine. And they've given plenty of warnings to this effect. They have said that an attack on any of these four new oblasts is an attack on Russia. It would be considered an act of war. And if they now again, I don't want to conflate a declaration of war with an actual war. There's a war going on between Russia and Ukraine. Has been since January. Russia has been at war with Ukraine, but they didn't officially declare war on Ukraine. And so the mission hasn't been the total destruction of the Ukrainian state. Once the Ruskies give it a couple weeks maybe, and they will cite some attack on one of these four oblasts as an attack on Russia, and then they will formally, in their own legal system and legislative system, declare war on Ukraine. And at that point, the goal of the mission will shift from trying to liberate the Donbass to exterminating the regime in Kiev. And so at that stage, the war will just be fought very differently. And things will intensify. And that's a scary thought. I think that things are going to get a lot worse in Ukraine. And I pity the people who live there that are caught in the middle. I wouldn't want to be there. And it's a sad situation. I hope it's over very, very soon, but I don't think that it will be. I think that at this point, Russia escalating would lead to a quicker end to the war, because it is clear at this point the Russians are not going to turn back. That was the whole point of Putin's speech. At least these 4 oblasts are Russian forever. That was the word that Putin gave. And so he's not going to, give up and say, you know what, this is a waste of time. We're just going to stop fiddling around in Ukraine. We're bored. We're going to go home, like the U.S. did with Iraq and Afghanistan. That's not going to happen 10 years from now. The U.S. didn't declare, Iraq to be a new U.S. state. They made it a puppet state, and then just sort of moseyed on out when nobody was watching. Russia's not doing that. So they have, I don't want to say painted themselves into a corner, because that implies that they're weak. But they've staked their flag, literally. They have raised the Russian flag in these 4 oblasts, and that flag, as far as they're concerned, is never going to come down. The only way that those flags are coming down is if the current Russian government ceases to exist, which I don't want to say, hey, I'm going out on a limb here, but I don't think that is going to happen anytime soon. So, anyway, with that said, I will try my best, I promise. I will try. I can't promise that I will do it, but I will try and see you folks back here tomorrow.